Hi, a very good morning to everyone, and welcome to this webinar session. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Alice Leong. I am a professional practicing architect and a manager from Architect MAA Syndrome Berhad. So currently, I'm a PAM Council member, also the chairman of PAM Sustainable Climate Change New Urban Agenda Committee, and as well as the GBI accredited panels. So today I will be your moderator for the second sessions of webinars with the themes green buildings and what the big fast. So a very short introduction about these programs. This webinar actually comprising of 3 series in totals, and the first programs organized by the Gamuda Park in partnership with Think City Institute in conjunction with the International Days of Biological Diversity, with all falls on the 22nd May of every year since year 2000. So the theme of this year's of the celebration is our solutions are in nature. So today we will be focusing actually on the biodiversities in built environment. Let us move on to the next one. So today we have 2 speakers that you can see on the screens, and they will share with us with their knowledge and their experience in this green building industry. So our first speaker you can see on the screen is engineer Thirukumaran Jallendran, who will be joining us live from Australia, and speaker is architect Sarly, Adre Sarkum from SAQ. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to begin with a very brief introductions of our very first speaker, which is engineer Thirukumaran Jallendran. So prior to joining the perspective as a sustainable principle, Thiru was actually responsible for advancing at Norman Disney and Young. In short form, is called NDY Sustainable Present in New South Wales. So prior to that, Thiru spent several years with the John Hollands Group in Sydney in sustainable manager role on the award-winning Australian dollars of 7.3 billion, Sydney Metro Northwest, and Australian dollars of 3.8 billion West Connect and for its projects. So in Malaysia, Thiru was a sustainable director on the Australian dollars of 2.5 billion TRX life quarters urban regenerations. So project by Landlist in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, as a sustainable director with Landlist, Thiru drew the philosophies of creating the place for people, embracing the challenges of optimizing multiple disciplinary project outcomes that are sustainable as well as meet the required commercial business, social aspirations of all the stakeholders. So prior to this role, Thiru was a head of sustainables of Landless in Asia. So, Thiru is also the co-founders of the Malaysia Green Building Council in year 2007 and served on this board for 6 years. He co-developed the Malaysia Green Building tools in Malaysia Index and published 3 editions of Green Page of Malaysia, the first and the only green building product service directories in Malaysia. So his previous role, he also worked closely with all the government organizations in Malaysia, Japan, as well as Singapore. So he works a lot in green building. So he has a very impressive network throughout the Southeast Asia. So without wasting any time, so I'll hand over the platforms to Thiru. So let us welcome engineer Thiru. I'll hand over to you, Thiru.
Thank you, Alice. Looks like there's a slight issue with the video, but we'll get back soon. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this seminar. As Alice has done enough introductions to me, and yeah, it's exciting to be back here. Talking to a group of passionate individuals. Now, with the first slide, I have to have short disclaimer. Just wanted to let everyone know that many of the pictures that you see in my presentation were either stock pictures or stock images, so I sourced them from the internet purely for educational purposes. So just wanted to have it out there. Now, what's the first slide, right? You see the picture of the Earth, sorry, not the moon. It was taken in 1968 by the astronaut William Anders as he was on a lunar orbit during the Apollo 8 mission, and it was later declared as the most influential environmental picture ever taken. In a later day interview, William Anders did say that we went out to explore the moon and we discovered the Earth. Like it's a profound image of our planet and how alone we are in the universe and how empty the space is around us. And more importantly, what it does say or what it does mean is that this is our home, the only home that we have ever known, and everything that we do stays there and has an impact on the planet. So with that, move on to my first slide. Quick introduction on Perspektiv, the company that I'm with now. Who are we? We are a group of sustainability and environmental professionals and experts based out in Australia. We specialize in infrastructure sustainability, Green Star, and environmental management systems, and have helped deliver successfully 30 over projects and have played roles in significant state infrastructure projects such as the WestConnex, Sydney Metro. Some of you might know this, some of you might not know this. Melbourne Metro, as well as Western Australia's Northlink projects. Now, what's a building? Right? We all know what a building is. I hope we do. From a building, literally, a building is there to provide us shelter from the elements. As simple as that. From time immemorial, that's what a building meant to do. A building goes through a life cycle, just like anyone else. From the planning stage to the use stage and to the demolition stage. And sustainability has an impact of that way. The picture that I've selected over here, that's the picture of the 40 apartment buildings in Victoria. When it was completed, it was the world's tallest composite timber building ever built. Like that. Not sure it still is, but yeah. So what's a green building? Like many people ask that question, and this is probably the image that comes to most people, especially if you ask a 5-year-old, that's what they think a green building is. But a green building, I would love to live in a house with that. Not sure that my family would agree, but yeah. But a green building basically just looks like any other building. Like these are examples of some green buildings from across the globe. You'd probably recognize the City Mall. So what I'm trying to show here is that a green building can look like any other building. Some examples from Malaysia. So the iconic Twin Towers, the Diamond Building in Putrajaya, which incidentally was one of the most greenest buildings when it was built, the Penaga Hotel, Prime Minister's Office, and a few other buildings as well, the DG headquarters, and the Sime Darby Idea House, which is there as well. Some international examples, Namba Parks, NTU, campus building with that sweeping landscape roof, pretty impressive. And some examples from Australia, we had the Sydney Metro on the left-hand corner, and Melbourne Metro, WestConnex, as well as the new up-and-coming Western Sydney Airport, and that designs by Zahadid. So I'll touch a bit on Sydney Metro Northwest, a quick case study, but won't spend too much time on it. This was a project that just came out of. We completed it last year, $7.2 billion Aussie dollars. It's part of a $22 billion program. First time for this line represents the first time in Australia where they rolled out a rolling stock with a driverless rolling stock, a driverless train system. The canopies that you see in the corner, left-hand side corner, they're pretty special because we had 8 of those across the project, and then we had car park timber. So why is it significant? This project is the first project in the world to be certified, to receive a project certification under the Forest Stewardship Council as well as the PFC schemes. The rolling stock also has regenerative capacity and 100% powered through renewables. So we have a dedicated plant built specifically for this project out in Barrel, 134 gigawatt hours per year. That's a bit of a snapshot of the sustainability initiatives. It was a snapshot in time. It was done about 6-8 months before the project was completed. We made improvements on many of those items that you see there. I will not go through all of it. Just feel free to read through and let me know if you have any other questions on this project specifically. So what makes a building green, right? It's a big question. Like, some of you might be further along on this journey on sustainability. You already know some of the answers, but if you ask me, I like to break things down into small parcels, and in my mind at least, there are 5 key elements, and that's water, nature, energy, indoor, and environment, as well as materials. So for the beginner, when you're getting on this journey, trying to understand what it all means, try to break it down into small bite-sized chunks and work on it, and you can't go wrong. So with nature, there are indoor planting elements, outdoor planting. You talk about food gardens, you talk about organic management of your plants and your pesticide management and all of that stuff, and as well as local produce. Bringing food, using consuming food that's produced locally, and I'm a big advocate of that as well. So if you're in Malaysia, try to eat local produce instead of importing in from overseas that has a huge environmental footprint. Now, indoor plants, it's just not just, there's a whole biophilic element to this. I understand that there was a topic on biophilia conducted by, I think, through this Think City series. But beyond that, plants also help scrub or clean the indoor environments. And, there are guidelines around what sort of plants you should use, what sort of plants you should not use, all of that. Apart from looking pleasing, good to look at, they play an important role of cleaning the air within the space. Outdoor green spaces, again, super important. Some of the projects that we've been involved in, there was the Gem supermarket. I remember clearly over in Singapore. There was this target to offset whatever green space that we took over with rooftop as well as facade planting, and we did that. I think we did 112% or 120% thereabouts. So similar to that project that you see on the left, that's the Parks shopping center in Sydney, and then demonstrate like that project would have offset more than what it had, the space that it's occupying. Now, why is that important? There's this whole issue around urban heat island, and having a greenscape around your building helps mitigate that. Food gardens are not as hard as they may seem daunting. Like I've been talking about green buildings and the initiatives for some time. When it sort of occurred to me that, what, I should give this a go, take a stab at this. I should walk the talk, right? So when we were living in Malaysia, I was in USJ, and we didn't, we didn't have much of a land around us, so the back lane of the houses, there was this bituminous pavement, the back lanes. So what I thought was, it'd be cool to demonstrate whether we are able to grow anything on that pavement, and that's what I did. So I just, got some bricks and lined them up and created this little corner with edibles. And to my surprise, it did really well. Like I couldn't believe it. So I was then, and from that point onwards, I keep telling people, like, look, if I can do it, I've never done this before in my life, anyone can. And it's all about keeping it organic. Well, when you say it's not strictly organic, you don't have to get it certified, but steer clear from pesticides and insecticides and all those nasty stuff. Look, my philosophy in planting was simply, if something doesn't work, if some plant requires a lot of pesticides and management to keep it going, don't plant that, plant something else. Local, native, adaptive. Now, these are, words that they use a lot in the green building space. When they say, when you're selecting plants for your landscape, make sure it's local and make sure it's native and it's adaptive. Why choose plants that are native and adaptive? Simple. It doesn't require a lot of input. You don't need exotic pesticides or or other means of keeping it alive. So if that plant is from the region, use that. Again, with food produce, sourced locally, because that has a much lower environmental footprint than compared to importing apples and oranges from overseas. Now, moving on to energy, when we talk about energy, it's in that order, right? You start with the orientation of the building. You look at insulation, efficiency of the equipment that you use within the house. And then once you've done all of that, then you start talking about offsetting renewable energy. And more importantly, it's all about sufficiency, like, just enough. The concept of just enough. Don't do too much, don't do too little. You don't want a house to be cold, or you don't want your house to be too hot. But at the same time, just use what is required. And in itself, I think that's a sustainable way of doing things. So building orientation, that's the starting point. Most architects start there. Before the advent of green building ideas and technologies and concepts, people are just designing homes based on which direction they like to face. But there's a bit of science behind that. And your architects, your planners, your sustainability consultants would be able to step you through that. And again, it depends on which part of the world you are, which side of the equator that you're located. If you're on the north, traditionally people want south-facing windows. If you're in the south, you'll be having north-facing windows. And if you're in the tropics, you want a house that's oriented along. You want the hard walls, east and west facing hard walls, because that's where most of the heat comes in. Insulation is super critical. Like, this is something that every house should have. Whether you're living in the temperate zone or whether you're living in the tropics, you still need insulation. And you need insulation on your roof. If you're living in a single-story house, walls need to be properly insulated, because a lot of heat escapes through the walls and through the roof. 70% of heat in a single-story dwelling, 70% of heat comes from the roof. In a double-story setting, that's about 50% of the heat that comes through. And it's funny that how many people spend, won't think twice about spending a lot of money on their 70-inch screen LED TV, but talk to them about a $4,000, $4,000 commitment for having insulation in the roof, and they balk at that idea. Energy efficiency is critical. LED lights are almost the norm now. Many years ago was compact fluorescence, and before there was fluorescent lights, before there incandescent lights. I think incandescent lights have been, you can't find. I think incandescent lights, they've rolled it out. You can't find it anymore in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so in that spectrum, right, from right to left, left being the most efficient, right being the least efficient, picking the right solution for your house. And when you talk about efficiency, you also talk about efficacy, the amount of light output you get per wattage. Now, with energy efficiency, we're not only talking about lights, we're also talking about air conditioning systems, your fridge, your TV, all of the equipment that you have in the house. So there's issues regarding concerning phantom loads and all of that. Now, once you've tackled all of that, you've got your orientation right, you have proper insulation in your house, you've got energy efficient fittings and fixtures, then you can start thinking about renewable energy, because really you want to bring your base load down, and then you see whatever that's left over, whether you can supplement that or replace that with renewable energy. So something that I think many of you are familiar with, you would have seen solar panels, and there's windmills and all that you could consider. And finally, sufficiency. Can you be self-sufficient? That's the most important thing. Don't have 5 lights on in your house and you need only one. So don't have to have your air conditioner setting at 16 degrees only to wear a jacket and sit in the house. Many years ago, I saw this advertisement in the papers in Malaysia where they were advertising this aircon unit, and the free gift was actually a winter jacket. I thought it was quite ironic. So it's all about that. Again, with food as well, food gardens. So, I have that slide there because it does take a lot of energy to transport food from faraway places. So sufficiency means, if you can grow your own food, that's like printing money, right? As simple as that. Yeah, and there are other options, solar heaters and whatnot. So with water, Moving on quickly here, you talk about efficiency, water efficient systems, you talk about rainwater harvesting, you talk about wastewater management, irrigation, and the quality of the water, more importantly. Efficiency, we've all started seeing in the region dual flush systems. They're no longer the premium item to have. It's become the norm. And only question is, do you know which button to press? I guess you got to make that call when you're using the loo. But water efficiency goes beyond flushing systems. You're talking about water efficiency of your taps, your showers, everything else. So the whole idea is to reduce the amount of water that you use, because it takes a lot of energy to harvest that water, or rather collect the water, treat it, and pipe it 100 kilometers to your house, only to have it spent flushing the toilets or washing the pavement. Rainwater harvesting, in a place like Malaysia, or in any region there's a lot of rainfall, it's a good idea to actually have installed rainwater housing tanks. There's ways and means to do it. First flush, how much water you can capture, how much water you can use, what's the stand time, all of that stuff. But it's really a good thing to do because we have all of this free water coming down from the sky. Use that on your lawns, use that to wash your porch, use that in your flushing systems if that's possible, and do not try to stay away from potable water as much as you can. Wastewater recycling, it's not that common in households, but some parts of the world they actually do consider this, and also it is something that's doable. I think in Israel they are really into this. Countries like Hungary, they innovated a concept where they could have centralized or decentralized wastewater treatment plants, reusing the water back in irrigation. Irrigation, yep, key component of all of this. I mean, first and foremost, use non-potable water as much as you can, and consider options like, solutions like drip irrigation instead of having a sprinkler system spraying all of the water into the air, only to be evaporated back into the environment. Water quality is super important. There are a lot of waterborne diseases, and the more important, we need to ensure that the quality of the water that we drink, is maintained, and and that's one of the bits that we do look at when you undertake a green building evaluation and strategies. You look at this absolutely. That's something that's really close to people's hearts. Moving into the indoor environment, key component, like we spend a lot of our time indoors, right, whether like it or not. So we have to make sure that the indoor environment that we operate in remains clean and nurturing and healthy. So the elements that you normally consider under the indoor environment, involves daylight, things like daylight, air quality, access to daylight, noise pollution, quality of the installation and the things that you use, as well as comfort of the being. And why is that important? Like, taking a step back before I go into the slide, I read somewhere, it's an old slide, they say in the 30-year life cycle or lifespan of a building, 92% of the cost that's attributed to that building goes into staff employment, employing of the staff, or staff salaries. So if you put that into context, you would realize that you have to emphasize a lot on the indoor environment quality of any space, whether it be it your home or hospital or place that you work. Now, access to daylight, again, has a bit of biofilling nature. People do respond better. Patients in hospitals have shown to improve better and recuperate better when they do have access to outdoors, access to daylight. So a lot of green building strategies have, they have ideas as well as strategies to bring as much daylight as they can into the building, while at the same time keeping the heat out. Air circulation is critical. Again, we need to get as much air circulated through the building, keeping, like in some strategies, talk about one air change, one pass, so like you always have clean air within the building, and this is important. Again, under current under the current situation with the pandemic, everyone realizes that your health is your number one asset, and that again, we can really go into detail, but it's not for today. You talk about things like VOC, volatile organic compounds, paint with low VOC, furniture with low VOC, floorboards that have low VOC emissions, and formaldehydes, and a lot of elements. Again, air circulation, indoor air quality, off-gassing of products would be looked at in this space. Noise attenuation, basically reduction of noise transmission through walls, especially when in the situation you're living in terrace homes. You want to ensure that you don't want to hear your neighbors arguing, and also again, as more and more people work from home, it is super critical that you look at that sort of abatement of noise, reduction of noise, noise penetration through walls. And finally, quality, air quality. In buildings, outside the buildings, we're all too familiar with the quality of air. That picture is from Sydney during the recent bushfires, and you saw how quickly that deteriorated. People do retreat into indoors, and then again, then this whole then indoor air quality improvements are very, very important for us. There are ways and means to do this, and there's continuous ways of monitoring air quality and your air conditioning systems, the VAVs, your HEPA filters, all of that come into play, depending on whether you're living in a home or you're working in an office. There are issues with Legionnaires disease and so many things. But what's important, the point I'm trying to make here is air quality is important for our well-being, and that's something that we look at in this space. And thermal comfort. Yeah, so we don't want the air conditioning. You don't have to have the air conditioning unit running too cold, right? Like it just has to be comfortable enough. Like if you're living in a temperate region, you don't have to turn on the heat all the time. You could throw an additional layer of clothing and you get on with that. That's fine. So again, being sensitive to what the tolerance is amongst your occupants and what is required. When your outdoor temperature is 35 degrees and your indoor temperature is 22 degrees, imagine that's a differential of 12 degrees when you walk in one place to another, and that's sort of it's like a shock to the system. So the ideal scenario would be trying to maintain it just about 24 degrees plus minus 2 degrees, and that's just about the right range for a human being. With materials, we talk about responsible sourcing, obviously the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle, and finally a 4th R thrown in there: rethink. Think about your processes and how you do things. Responsible materials, they're all around you. There are products that have EPDs, environmental product declaration. They have environmental labels. That's an option. The green pages, we came up with the green pages after we developed the green GBI, the Green Building Index in Malaysia, to support the industry, capacity build, and also to have available green building products, in Malaysia. And there are similar directories and initiatives all over the world. There's the iSupply program here, run by the Infrastructure Sustainability Council of Australia. And it's all about using products and materials with low embodied energy, and that are friendly to the environment, that are environment friendly. With waste, it's a big dilemma. Waste has always been a huge challenge for the world. About 50% of waste is organic. There's about over 2 billion tons of waste generated in the world every year, and that's a huge problem. And waste, in my mind at least, waste is a renewable resource. I mean, like, if you're talking about renewable resources, waste is one of that. But the key is to reduce it. The key is to actually segregate the waste at source and divert it from landfills. Now, the images that I have here, this was a program, I can't remember, 10 years ago, I think. It was done by this organization they did this experiment in the US. They had families and people keep aside 1 week's worth of trash, and then later on they photographed them with the trash. Just to give you an indication as to how much waste a family or a person generate per day. In Malaysia, I think I read some time ago, each individual generates something like half a kilo, 500 grams of waste, 0.5 kilos of waste a day. So you can just add the numbers up. Well, this would be my last slide, really. And when we talk about green buildings, these are some key takeaways, in my mind at least. First and foremost, nature heals and sustains. Remember that. Energy efficiency reduces the impact on the environment, on your electricity bills, and wasting of water is responsible. So try and use non-potable water as much as you can. And we only have one planet. Like, we haven't found a planet where we could go and habitate and live. So we have to take care of the one that we're living in. And finally, healthy indoors prolong lives. So that's a key element in any consideration of green building strategies. So I guess that's all I have for today. So with that, I would like to thank you for making the time to listen to us. And thank you, Alice. Thank you, moderators, for making this happen. Talk to you all very soon. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Thiru. I think this is a wonderful sharing in this morning. So I actually agree with Thiru's. The one important keyword that I pick it up is the sufficient, because which is very true. If you observe throughout the peoples around you that not many actually aware about the sufficient. So, for instance, I just put a very layman example. So, if you saw your neighbors getting a new fridge, but in your house you already have a fridge. So, but the kind of psychologies you want to compete. So you get yourself a new fridge. So, but you already have one actually, which is kind of sufficient. So I think this is a very important keyword that to guide everyone in either you are in a professional in this industries or construction line, or you are in other industry. I think this is a very, very important keyword, because in this morning I just happens to saw an articles about that. So it really, I think, touched on this, that if you really observe, our earth actually have already prepared varieties of nature resources, which is actually sufficient for all the living, including humans in this world. But yet you will find that humans have that kind of exploration since many, many years back. And I think some of the things that they have actually ventured into something that to create a new resources, but you already have it. So maybe it's time for people to rethink, and instead of wasting your time to create new things, the things that already have, then why not we just go back to actually to the nature that already have. So you just use it creatively. So I think this pandemic, I look at in more a positive way, that a lot of people will be, cooped up in a house, you are controlled in the movement, you can't go out, or you're locked down. So this is actually a very good time that you are experiencing yourself, that the place that you're staying called home. So how it gave you the impact during this period. So time for you to think, time for you to aware about this and think of how to do it. So of course, our next speakers perhaps will actually share a more experience of how you can do that. So you can post all the questions coming up, and we will ask your questions to the panelists at the end of the presentation of the second speakers. So right now, let us, prepare for, to welcome the next speakers, architect Sarly. And I think he will be talking about the impacts of the green buildings. So let me have a very short introduction of architect Sarly. So architect Sarly actually is an architectural futuristics in sustainable proponents and design activists. So currently, he helms the hybrid architectures design firm SA or Sarly under Sarkum Architectures in Berhad, which combine cutting-edge architecture design solution with extensive research-based explorative approach to solve challenging integrated design problems. So the firm has won several international competitions and represented the country in several in the world-class exhibitions. He's also the past president of Malaysia Green Building Council, which is under the auspices of the World Green Building Council. He was also the deputy president of the Pertubuhan Architect Malaysia, or English is called the Malaysian Institute of Architects, and he is also the GBI facilitator and previously was one of the accredited panels in the GBI. So he is an academics advisor in Master of Green Building Architecture in University Technology Mara, UITM, and he's now also teaches architecture studios of master's program in University of Malaya as an appointed associate professor industry for the universities. So with that, I'll hand over these platforms to architect Sarly. Over to you, Sarly.
Thank you, Alice, for such a wonderful introduction. Yeah, great to be with old friends. Selamat Hari Raya, everybody. Yeah, as we are still in this Raya period. And onwards to my talk, basically, I'm going to talk about how green buildings impact everyone and what's the great fuss about green buildings in a very simple way so that at all skill levels, at all understanding levels can understand what we are talking about. Yeah. So a bit of introduction, I think there's no need for this. Alice has given such a good introduction on myself. This is just a link if you need to ask me questions later. Yeah. This MCO has given us a glimpse of what it would be if human activity actually stopped. Yeah, and this is a photo of the Melaka River, and it's amazing that you can see in this photo that there are fishes, and the water suddenly becomes super clear, and it suddenly becomes something that is what people thought could not happen. And I think this is just a visual way that shows how actually human activity actually impacts the environment. Yeah, and amongst that, we are facing a climate crisis that really threatens us all, and we are already you are bearing witness to a lot of very weird weather last year. There's fires in Australia, I think, and all around the world. There's all kinds of massive climate change issues that are happening, and it's just the beginning. And if we don't look at it seriously, then we are really as a whole humanity, as a whole planet, we are going to get into a really big problem. And when you look at environmental issues as a person, as a lay person, you always look at transportation because you see smoke coming out of cars, you see people, you see these things pollute, yeah, but you rarely see buildings. But there are numerous studies that have been conducted by many universities, many authorities that clearly show that buildings all across the board is at least 30% of the carbon emissions of any human activity. So transportation is not the leading cause. So that's why green buildings play such an important role. And that's why perhaps you have heard so many talk about green buildings, green cities and all that, because actually it does contribute a lot without us knowing, without us seeing, because you don't feel, when you turn on your air conditioner, you don't feel the coal being burned at a power plant hundreds of miles away, but actually it is, yeah. And if you look at the floor area growth, this is a global floor area growth chart from Architecture 2030 done in 2018. So you can see that we are going from roughly now 2.5 trillion square feet to in 2030 we are going to reach like 3.5 trillion square feet of buildings in the world, and that is just humongous growth of cities and building space. And if we don't take care of it, it's going to have a huge impact on our environment. And that is why I think the UN sort of marry the built environment very well into their sustainable development goals and for 2030. And among the advanced goals are all related to buildings like sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, partnerships with goal, climate action. All those are very much interrelated with green buildings. And of course, the key to it all is having this balance between our priorities that benefit our economy and benefit the people, and of course benefit the planet. And that is the sustainability goal that drives the green building movement as always. And I think I would like to draw the attention to these two buildings. Both are very good green buildings. I think Engineer Thiru, my old friend, also showed this diamond building, which is a platinum rated building in Putrajaya. And also the other one is Hotel Panaga, which is a heritage building, but it's a gold rated building. So both are green buildings, but they don't look anything alike, because a green building is not about how it looks or the type of architecture, but it's about the performance of the building. So there's many ways to skin a cat. And this is another example of a platinum building. This is the headquarters or the PAM Center in Jalan Tangsi Bangsa. It is a platinum rated building, and it's as you know, PAM is an organization. So we did this building with at a very minimal cost, if possible, to do the greening. So if you have a chance, you please do visit it and see how a green building actually works in an urban environment. And when you talk about green, I think Engineer Thiru has mentioned a few things just now on the characteristics of a green building. But how do you actually measure this, right? It's a very abstract concept to measure, and it's not like length or distance. So you cannot. I mean, if you want to say somebody needs to be a model, you immediately have, he needs to be a certain height. But what makes a building green, and how can we agree on that? And that's where rating systems come in. And the rating system that has been adopted by the Malaysian Green Building Council is the Green Building Index, which was developed and owned by the Malaysian Institute of Architects and also the Association of Consulting Engineers Malaysia. So this is like a measuring stick to measure actually how green a building is. And how do they do that? Is that by looking at all the stakeholders have to agree on what is important for the country. And different countries have different sort of like priorities. Yeah. For example, Thiru, which comes from Australia, their green rating tool is called Green Star, and perhaps Green Star has different priorities than a green building index. But all in all, the criteria are almost the same. And the rating system is based on a 100-point system. So when you talk about platinum, it's like getting an A+ in an exam. It's 86+ points. Gold is 76 to 85. Silver is 66 to 75, and certified is 50. So certified is basically where you start off as a green building. So as I mentioned, the criteria is the same, almost all the same all over the world. And I think even Engineer Thiru just now mentioned most of these criteria. Yeah? So we have energy efficiency, we have indoor environmental quality, we have sustainable site planning and management, we have materials and resources, we have water efficiency, and of course innovation. So this is for the residential new construction. So you can see the distribution of the points here, whereby the most important thing is sustainable site planning and management, which is 33 points. But if you look at a commercial building, which is the non-residential new construction points for the tool, so it's a different tool for office buildings and commercial buildings, you look that there's an emphasis on energy. So this is how the industry looks at what is important for which. Yeah. So for example, the idea behind a residential building should be sited in a proper way, near to transport hubs, near to facilities, so that you don't have problems. You can't have a green building that causes massive jams, for example. And I think, as I mentioned just now, different countries have different priorities. For example, in the Singapore tool, which is Green Mark, there is no consideration for site planning or transportation, because in Singapore it's an island, and anywhere you put a building in Singapore, you will have an MRT station or a good bus stop or a taxi stand. But we, as Malaysia, is a larger country and we have projects going on everywhere, sustainable site planning and management becomes an issue which is very, very important. And we have many tools specialized for many building typologies. Yeah, we have as I mentioned, the residential, non-residential tools. We have for data centers, hospitals, hotels, malls, and whatnot. And we even have a tool for township. Yeah, so I wouldn't go into detail on the pointing system, but they vary little bit by bit, because on the way that each building sort of like functions. For example, a hospital does not have a downtime. It functions 24 hours. So it must be different in an office which has a downtime. And Malaysia is actually not foreign to green. We have always been green. Our vernacular architecture, the way that we have always built, is very in line with the environmental way that we have been living. Yeah. Or if you look at around the country, all our houses share that the design of natural ventilation, the design of being cool. You go to a kampung house, you always feel cool because the roof is well insulated. You have a lot of cross ventilation. Even the floors, there is wind coming through the floors as well. So, but unfortunately, what has happened is the modern movement came in the 60s, in the 50s, and not just in Malaysia, but revitalized the world. This picture was taken in Sharjah, in Abu Dhabi, and it could be in Kepong or it could be in Bukit Bintang. So the homogeneous architecture or the homogeneous way that we're building is not actually suited to our environment. But unfortunately, this is the thinking of many architects and planners at that time. And we have inherited this issue now, and we are only just relearning how to build according to our way of our forefathers, which have been tried and tested for many generations. And when we talk about the Malaysian Green Building Council, it's not just us. We are affiliated with the World Green Building Council, and we are one of many green building councils around the world. Yeah, because each country has its own, as I mentioned, its own priorities, its own issues. Yeah. Example again, water is very important for Singapore because they buy water from Malaysia, and water is very important for Australia because they don't have enough viable water sources. Yeah, but Malaysia Green Building Council is one of the established members of the Malaysian of the World Green Building Council. That means that we join a upper tier of green building councils of developed nations, such as the Australian Green Building Council, the UK Green Building Council, the American Green Building Council, the US Green Building Council, the France Green Building Council, and all the other developed nations. So our standards for greens is very high, actually. Yeah, and when you look at the Green Building Index, it's also a very international tool, and it's of international standard. And what this means, yeah, is that we track, when you have a means of measure, we can track how much spaces that have been turned green and to what degree. Yeah? So as of 2015, there was 149 million square feet of space here. And we have projects that are being distributed all around the country. But if you can see, the main concentration are more towards the urban areas, which is Selangor and Kuala Lumpur, and as well as Penang. Yeah, Penang is one of the great city-states that really push green. And and all this can be actually translated to the tons of carbon emissions per annum. Yeah. So how we do this is we look at the actual floor areas and convert it into the energy usage, and we know that the energy usage per square foot is a certain rate, and then we say we look at how much savings in terms of carbon that has generated. So basically, if you look at This is the current one from 2019. It's around 226.7 million square feet of space that has been green, yeah, in Malaysia. Most of that is new non-residential and new residential, yeah. So we also have an existing building tool, and this is for to change old buildings into green buildings. That needs to do a lot more take up. But if you can look at the carbon reduction there, you can see that there is 1,063 kilotons, which is 1,063,000 tons. Yeah, and
Sarly,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. You have 2 minutes more.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, you can continue now. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does this mean? It's the real impact of these 226 million square feet is actually 1 million over tons of carbon per year saved, yeah, just by doing green buildings. And to visualize that, 1 ton is almost equivalent to 1 elephant. So imagine 1 million elephants being saved in terms of weight. Or carbon weight being saved from the environment just by doing green buildings. And that's not the only impact. There is also the business impact, which I think this is a report from the World Green Building Council. You're free to download all these reports from the World Green Building Council and the Malaysian Green Building Council websites. It shows that a green building does actually, it's more profitable and it's better for people. Yeah. And as you can see, the cost actually is in terms of personal salaries or in terms of upkeep of the people, and the actual cost to build the building and to maintain the building is very low. Yeah, so taking care of the people is a priority, and that is the core of green buildings. And this is just to drive the point through. This is a factory in Penang. It's called the Pyramid Factory, and it is a green factory designed from scratch up through competition. And by looking at it, it's it's not like a normal factory, but it functions as a factory, and you feel that you want to be there and you want to work there, right? So in conclusion, the grass is greener when you water it. Means that, the world will become better if we care for it. If we don't water the world, we don't care for our lawn, we don't care for our planet, then all is lost. We can't blame other people when the grass on our lawn is not green. With that, I will pass back to our moderator, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarly. Yeah, you're keeping on the time. Thank you so much. I think from what Sarly has been presented, I think it's kind of true that each of the country have its own tools, green rating tools. It's always good to refer as a reference, but to straightway implement to your own country may not be quite suitable because of the local context, the climates, bylaw, that all sort of things. So the tool is actually act as a guide. So you will use it wisely, get a good consultants to really advise you. So you will actually implement correctly, more sufficient in terms of time and cost, most importantly. So Sarly, stay with us, and I would like to invite our first speaker, Thiru, to come back to the screen with us, and because we are going to start our Q&A session right now. So, okay, I can see both is already on the screen. Oh, there's quite questions actually been posted. So I have to pick and choose. And for all the audience out there, we might run a little bit time over the past 11:30, but don't worry, because we will allow some extra time for all the upcoming questions. Of course, we can't answer all the questions, but we'll pick some most important and most common people will ask, so that two speakers will actually enlighten with all of us. Okay, let's start and do that. Okay, this question is actually to Thiru. It comes from Kumar. So the question is, what policy ideas are there to impose low carbon and energy efficient building requirements for new and existing building in Malaysia?
Yeah, okay,
Sarly?
cool. Yeah. So I think Sarly would be able to answer this better because I've not been there for the past 4 years. But I know that MS 1525, there were two iterations of it was introduced. Not sure if it's been made, if it's been legislated, but MS
It
one
has,
five
it
two five
has.
has, yeah, so it has guidelines on how, what sort of energy efficiency concentrations should be in place, as well as I think many of the government I think many of the new developments, do they still have green building certification requirements, Ali?
Yeah, I think
I think,
let me just add, Tiru.
yeah,
The MS 1525, for those who do not know, is a energy efficiency code standard for Malaysia, which has now been incorporated into our uniform building by law. So theoretically, all submission needs to have energy efficiency. But our constitution, the way that our law works is we have a federal, we have a state, we have a local authority. So some local authority have adapted this new bylaw, and they are implementing it, like for example Penang, yeah, but or Putrajaya and many of the bigger, more advanced local authorities. But unfortunately, our law also says that if you are any local authority in any place, you can choose what kind of uh, sub law that you're going to implement. So some of them don't yet. So that I think that is kind of one of the challenges of Malaysia lah. Although federal says something, not necessarily everybody follow.
but it's the same problem all over. Like even here in Australia, all the states behave like they're their own country, right? So they have their own requirements and rules and policies, and it varies from state to state. I guess it's the same in Malaysia. But what is interesting is that states like Selangor, when I was still there, they already had requirements where new housing developments needed to have rainwater housing tanks. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but
Yeah,
the other states are following suit. Malacca had its own green technology initiative for master plan. So it's a work in progress. But I guess sometimes we can't wait for the government to tell us what needs to be done. And I think that's how GBI and MGBC started from ground up, not waiting for the government to do something about the state of
correct.
affairs. We just did it, and we went ahead and did it and got received government endorsement after that. So just keep pushing, right?
Cool. I think that is a great, good answer. So, okay, I pick up one question actually. I think for both of the speakers, you can answer on that. I think kind of good questions. So the question is actually come from Lilian Wang. The question is, how can we live more sustainable in an apartment that is not a green building certified? So is it there's a way of more feasible to re-establish a green living spaces, such as like demolishing or reinstalling water harvesting system or so far and so forth? Maybe you know
Uh,
Sally can answer first.
okay. Okay. I think if you live in an apartment or condominium, you can start your family. First and foremost, you have your electricity bill. That is an indicator of how much energy you use per month. And also you have your water bill. That is an indicator of how much water you use a month. So you can start reducing that. You can automatically see a reduction in just by behavior alone. Yeah, a lot of times our behavior is so bad. We did some projects at several schools, and just by telling the students to improve the way that they use electricity and water, there was a savings of around 30%. And I'm sure it will be similar to many households, because we take it for granted, because energy in Malaysia is quite cheap. Water is very cheap as well. Yeah. So other things is that you can also look at what you throw away and recycle more. What the amount of plastic waste, and try to separate. This is something that is good to do. And once you have done that for your home, perhaps you can influence your management or your JMB or management committee to actually adopt this on a condominium scale, and look at the whole development as how you can progress. Yeah. And I think that's basically where you start off. Yeah.
Yeah, Thiru?
Yeah, well, for me, I guess it's all about lifestyles and what you're willing to change. Look, the fact of the matter is 85% of buildings are not green. They're existing buildings and they're not green.
Yes.
So you're going to be living in a non-green building. So what? Doesn't matter. So there are two options. A, you move into a green space or green GBI certified building. B, you change your own lifestyle habits.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate of, if there's something that's already existing, use it. You can improve it. You don't have to demolish it. You can install additional systems. So you can change all your faucets, all your taps to low flow taps. You can do that. So you can reduce your consumption. But if your interest is in changing the overall building performance, then you obviously need to get in touch with the management committee and see what are the initiatives you can implement. You could even get them to consider having a green corner or have some sort of community planting on the grounds of the apartment that you're living in. Introduce green plants into the indoor space, and a lot of things you can do yourself. So then there's a lot of there's a lot of resources online. Just have a read. But if you
True.
need more ideas, reach out to Sarly or Alice, who are both in Malaysia, be able to guide you through that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
No problem.
That's great. Yeah, no problems. Okay, I think move on to the next questions. I think the questions from Alia and David is kind of similar. Both of them are touching on the cost. So Alia is asking that how could we balance the cost and sustainability during the construction stage, and David is actually referring the construction of doing green building in Malaysia is still higher compared with other countries. So both are touching on the cost if going for green. So maybe Thiru, you want to answer that first?
If I recall correctly, 2007, we were working on the Public Mutual headquarters in KL, Jalan Raja Chulan. And back then, the cost of green, like just to get basic certification, was something like 10% to get up to gold, I think. But by 2009, we had launched the Green Building Index, and then more and more projects came online. So even back then, 2007, the facade, the glass, we needed to get double glazed windows from Germany, from Interpaint. But by 2012, we already had plenty of options in Malaysia. So from when I left, the price had started to come down. So it doesn't have to cost more. So to get a green outcome, right now, the last study that I looked at demonstrated a negative investment. So if you go green, you actually save money rather than the other way around. I give it an example from over here. The project I was working on, the Sydney Metro, no, sorry, the West Connects, was a 6 kilometer, West Connects M4 East project was a 6 kilometer dual tunnel new road that we built. And the original concept actually called for a wearing cost. If you guys are familiar with road construction, so you've got layers, and the last layer is called the wearing cost, where your bitumen is. Because of green, because of sustainability, we had to look at that again, and we decided, you know what, and we also looked at the tunnel lighting requirements. So the tunnel lights, they had tunnel lights, continuous bands of light, and we said, look, if we can introduce LED lights, we can space them apart 5 meters, 15 meters. I think that's what we did. But for that to be efficient, we needed to have the space. You needed to have it light colored, like not dark colored. So bitumen is basically dark in color. So we can remove the wearing cost, the 25 mm, I think it was 25 mm wearing cost. We actually removed it, left it as, the concrete, we left it as bare. And that actually helped, sort of increase the light levels within the tunnel. So as a result of sustainability, we actually ended up saving money. There was a 6 kilometer of 50 mm thick wearing cost that we removed. And that's the same thing happens in buildings as well. Because of sustainability, you start designing things a bit more efficiently, and that in the end actually it saves you operation during the operational phase. It does save you money, and during construction sometimes it does save money, because you're starting to look at things in a more logical organized manner.
Okay, good. I think let's do one last questions. I think for both the speakers. This
Okay.
question is actually come from Roshan. And the questions is, does the current federal policy in Malaysia encourage developers to construct green buildings? If there is none, what do you think can be done to encourage developers to construct more green buildings?
I think currently there is still the MIDA incentives for green buildings. I think this involve corporate tax and all these exemptions for tax as well for green buildings. So I think you can get the information from the MIDA website. I think there are a lot of push for people to do green buildings in Malaysia from the government, because as far as the government is concerned, they are trying to control the energy balance in the country, because if we don't control the energy balance, the input of energy is so much that they need to produce more power plants, more hydro dams and whatnot. So it's actually a practical move for them, and that's why I think during those days they actually made quota, now what we know as MASTEC, right? The Ministry of Energy. Yeah, because it is something important with national security and also government policy.
Yeah, Thiru?
Yeah, Sarly has covered it, so yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, good. So I think our Q&A session has to be end here. To all the participants, ladies and gentlemen, yes, the time seems to be fly when we are deeply engaged in something very interesting and fun, but we have reached the end of the today webinar session. So I would like to express my deep thank you to all the two speakers, which they're all my friends, very close friends, we know for many
Yes.
years. Yes,
Thanks,
and
Alice and
yeah,
Sarly.
Thank
so
you.
we catch up
Selamat Hari
later.
Raya.
Yes, Selamat Hari Raya to all. So at the same times, I would like to thank to Gamura Park, Ting City, and we have two people who work behind the script, which is Duncan and also Donnie. We have to thank them, very much to having this meaningful platform for everybody. So to learn something very meaningful in this pandemic's, season. So, but last but not least, thank you again to the speakers.